Good afternoon, everyone. Could I please ask everyone to take their seats? The panel is about to begin. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining us again. I hope you had a productive day in your workshops, and I can only explain the absence of some of you and the fact that some of the workshops might have been so interesting and dragged on for a little longer that you did not make it back. Anyway, big thanks to those of you who did come back into the plenary, because we're about to start a very interesting panel discussion that will be translated, I'm told. Is that what the... Okay. That will also be translated into Russian, if you want to use your translation equipment. Now, the theme of the panel is Union 4.0, One Direction or Further Division. And I have to say, I do not envy Alexander his job of having to manage a discussion on such a vast array of topics within 60 minutes, because we are about to cover the diplomatic and economic challenges for the European community in the context of the 4.0 industry reform in the labor market, economy, society, so issues such as cybersecurity, competitiveness, and hybrid threats to European societies will be covered. And before I pass the floor on to Alexander, we have a fantastic selection of speakers that will introduce themselves. We are expecting a fifth speaker, so if you see somebody running onto stage later on, this is not a security matter. They are about to join the panel. We have Alexander Stommels, who will be chairing the panel discussion, CEO of the Circle of Sustainable Europe of Brussels. So, Alexander, over to you.
Well, thank you. So it said we will start with each person here at the chairs. I want to give the...
Well, let me present myself. I'm Hrant Bagration. I'm professor of the economics working in Yerevan, in Slavic University, also in Kiev, in Banking University. Well, I used to be for 4 years the Prime Minister of Armenia at the very beginning of 19th. And always engaged in this issue of the enlargement of the EU, or of the great cooperation, etc., etc. Just I'm going to give you some points for the coming nearest future. What will be important, let's say, for the next 20 years. So, let me introduce you some figures. These are figures of GDP of different countries and different regions. So, this is an anticipation of various experts, and you can remark that the interesting thing is that the specific weight of Eurasia will increase dramatically. Saying Eurasia, I mean Europe and Asia together, because this is one continent, and this we are going to see that, we are going to feel that this is one continent. In EU, they are not going to be happy with the low figures of the economic growth. And the perspective for EU countries in the nearest future will be how to enlarge economy based on the resources of Eurasia. That's going to happen, and I'm sure of that. Also here we have Africa, which is going to be the main problem of humanity for the next 20 years. We are going to see tremendous increase of population here. This is the poorest continent on resources, and we are going to see not very high rates of the economic growth. Australia, the most successful region of the world, last 48 years, they don't have economic decrease. For the last 48 years, the economic growth will be slowly. North America, that's going to be the main problem, but we are going to observe the minimum economic growth rate in North America. And one can understand Trump, who is trying to change the global world, to implement some limitations, to get some advantage for the American economy. But these actions are not going to bring long-term results for the United States, for whole North America and Latin America, which will be in the position of the on the average position. Foreign trade, that's an interesting issue, because usually in the world you have a faster growth of the trade than the GDP, you know. And the foreign trade will create some values for everybody. And based on foreign trade, we are going to observe that the Eurasian continent will be the fastest growing continent among the others. Based on foreign trade figures, we are going to see tremendous increase of turnover, much more higher temps than for the GDP, and tremendous increase of the loaded goods and services. And that's the create in China, the initiative one belt, one road. So Chinese are, in fact, they are very clever. They started to calculate it for 20, for 30 years, and they know what's going to happen in 20, 40 years. So I think my time is finished. Yeah, finished? Yes, and this is this initiative. This shows the movement, the streams of goods and services in the world. And around this scheme, the national economies will be reorganized everywhere. So as far as my time is finished, you know, I will be happy to answer your question. And that was the principle, what I put it in the lectures. I'm stopping here, you know. It's your turn, sir.
Okay, it's okay, my turn. 3 minutes, okay. Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Hans-Wilhelm Dünn. I'm the president of the German Cybersecurity Council. And I think we have today a very current topic, and everybody says cybersecurity is a very sexy topic. And I think that is a problem. 90% of the German decision makers, they love a congress, they like it to go to a cybersecurity congress, and then they go home, then they go in the office and they do nothing. And that is a problem. And we have to translate the topic from a very technical operative level to a decision maker level. And that is a problem that we have in Germany, that is a problem that we have in Europe, and that it is a problem that we have in the whole world. And we have a lot of different challenges, and we have a lot of nice and funny things in the smart planet, but the process enabler for all that is security. And that is a very important topic, and I think we have to control and understand our own systems. I think that is a very big problem, that we work with different software and hardware solutions from China, from different countries, and then we can stop the discussion about cybersecurity. And that is a big problem. And we have a big fight for talents. We have a big skill gap. We have no students. We have a lot of expensive employees in this field. And that is a big topic for our education programs, and we have to discuss later about it. And we need the topic attribution. We want to know who is the attacker behind the machine. And we speak about Russian attacks, China attacks, about the NSA and so on. But we have a lot of criminals, script kiddies and so on. And nobody knows who is the person behind the machine, behind the computer. And for that we need intelligence. For that we need a network of heads, we need trust, and we need exchange. And that's not our only technical operative discussion. And we need a discussion later, perhaps, I hope today, about the question security by design. Yes, if I want to buy a car or an airplane, I want a safe landing. And I don't need another big company to save every day my systems. And that is that are the different topics, and I think we have also to speak about the budget, about the organization. Our organization is a mix of the German DAX 30 companies, the big companies, the enterprises, And the intelligence sector, the authorities, we have in Germany a federal system with the German countries, 16 federal countries, and we have the science sector, and we have to combine it, and I think the future is not another single authority. I think the future is cooperation. The future is a cooperation platform like today to generate more cooperations with other universities, with other public and private sectors, and I hope we have a good discussion later, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for your invitation.
So good afternoon. My name is Arūnas Gražulis. I am Vice Minister of Interior of Lithuania. Just previously I heard a speech about the cybersecurity. My topic, or actually my field of activity, is rather down to earth. It's I cover the regional policy issue, issues. Technically, this means the set of policy measures which are aimed in order to ensure balanced development of all the territories of the countries. So technically, that people wouldn't be aiming for leaving regions, small towns, and moving to the capital or abroad. This is regional policy, or otherwise known as cohesion policy, is I think one of two largest policy of the European Union. So it's about 40% of the EU budget, actually 38 in this perspective. And it goes to that purpose, and that's why this huge amount of funding shows its importance both on the EU and on the national scale, especially for the post-2004 EU member states. On the other hand, if continuing your topic about security, the balanced development of the country, in fact, it touches one key and one core security element. This is the resilience of the people, of the population itself, because no matter how strong you would have intelligence, counter-attack measures, the key consumer of the, let's say, hostile information is still the population. So when people see the efficient state institution, they see that the policies at home, they go well, they become much more resilient to, let's say, hostile information from abroad, and let's put it like this, simplifies the tasks for the cybersecurity forces. So shortly, that's much about me.
Hello. Is this on? My name is Stephen Meyer. I come from Washington, D.C. I'm the Dean of Graduate Studies at the Daniel Morgan Graduate School of National Security in Washington. We are a relatively new school, but most of my career was spent working for the Central Intelligence Agency on mostly European issues. I've spent my life, my professional life, dealing with a lot of security issues. And one of the things that I've determined, come to appreciate, is we have to understand context to understand security. And I've got 8 propositions or questions that I want to throw out to you. And I would love, at the end, if you want to discuss any or all of these. The first one, which a number of the panelists have hit on, is how do we define security in your future? When I was your age, it was pretty simple. It was 20th century. The Soviet Union was the enemy. We knew why we had huge budgets for defense. We knew who the enemy was. They knew who their enemy was. It's not so clear anymore. What does security mean for your generation? Cyber, environmental security, pandemics, migration. Certainly Europe knows about the question of migration. How do you handle all those? The rebirth of Russia. What does this mean for the great powers? What does it mean for Europe? The third, the decline of American power. The United States is a power essentially in decline. We remain a very strong, very powerful country, but now we see peer competitors in Russia, in China, in Brazil, non-state actors, and we have leaders like Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin, so forth, who really don't care what American leaders think. They go by their own interests. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with the fracturing of the EU? The EU is an organization, in my view, in quite a bit of trouble. We are seeing different levels of economic development. The Northwest is a prosperous area dominated by German economic power. Increasingly, we see Southern Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, Italy, Spain, in a lot of trouble economically. Is there such a thing as exhaustion on the part of the European Union? Will there be new members? What's the relationship among the members in the European Union? The other side of that same question is the renationalization of European politics, driven by the economic and financial issues of 2008, the migration issues more recently. We are seeing much more nationalistic policies. Poland, Hungary, now Italy. We see Alternative for Deutschland, which has now record numbers in government. We have seen the issue of migration essentially drive British nationalism to withdraw from the European Union. What's the future of nationalism in Europe, especially in the context of the European Union? Challenges to NATO viability. How much authority does NATO have? How much credibility does it have? Is it still valuable as a defense mechanism? Or do the many different kinds of security call for something different, a third way? And the last thing I would ask you about is, what's the future of the state? The state's going to be around for a long time, but the state is being challenged by non-state actors as it has never been challenged before. Keep in mind, when the United States was attacked on 9/11, it was a non-state actor that attacked the U.S. The largest number of people killed on the American territory, the continental United States, ever. So how do you deal with all this change, this difference in context?
Hello, young leaders. It's really a pleasure that I'm here. Thank you for the invitation, my first time. And I must say, I really, really appreciate that you have such a forum. I only was in Krynica now for the 5th time. I heard about the young leaders, and this time I have the pleasure to be here. Thank you very much. Because I think that everything what my neighbor says or has said is true. It is really also my feeling that we have giant challenges in Europe and in the world, more than before, and we need solutions. And only you are the people who can find the solutions. I don't believe so much that we elder people can still make it. I even think that we have made some mistakes. And from my own professional experience, I'm not a security professional or expert, but I have worked for the European Union for more than 25 years. I was a banker. I was a consultant for small and medium-sized companies, technology transfer, innovation promotion, and these kind of things. And after I was retired 5 years ago, I have started my own business. So I'm a retired person with a startup. And that's always important to experience what it means, how difficult it is to establish a new market and start something new. What I wanted to say is nothing is shaped in stone. For my professional life, I can say the most important experience was the unification of Europe. And I have really experienced a lot of personal advantages from that. But I also see that we are now in troubles and that we need a new start. And I hope we can talk a little bit about that.
Yes, as attention, we would like also say we have in about 5 to 10 minutes extra to speak further. But for now, we have several questions from the organization and from some people here. The first question that I have is, how can we focus on innovative solutions to meet the needs of European citizens? Who can give an answer for this or has an idea for this?
Well, first of all, I think we should define the term. What it is innovative solution and what it is need of people. Basically, both concepts are pretty old. Need of people, this is technical, well, its general definition is what the significant group of the society wishes. Of course, within the certain legal limits. Innovative solution is also pretty, well, if to look historically, it's pretty old concept, simply the way of rethinking the ways of how the things were done before, and coming up with what could be made, let's say, better or more efficient. Actually, what the main issue of or fashion of contemporarity is related to some technological advance that we are having these days. It's related to the digitization, increase in number of electronic services, and actually I think it would be fair enough to call the empowerment of youth or better involvement of young people into the not only decision-making, but in fact in all forms of public life. We can take a very simple example, the rather fashionable concept of young people starting their own startups. I think I might be mistaken, but in the United States, you have a couple of multimillionaires who haven't reached the age at which they can get passport. And they're doing pretty well. So if we are speaking about innovations, I think we should first of all define the terms, and then define the technological background on which we are working, and then we must admit that yes, now we actually came up with the time span which allows very wide involvement of population, both as it regards the definition of needs, because we have younger and younger consumers, and actually much increasing number of very young people with a rather significant spending power, and at the same time we, or at least the Western world, or this developed world, we are having tools which can rather easily provide the market with the solutions to address those needs. So I would say that both we are at the age of great discovery, And I don't like myself to be called liberal, but I think we are having the situation when the market regulates itself, both in terms of supply and demand for the innovation. Being from civil service, and in fact, my colleague in Ministry of Interior, other vice minister, is in charge of civil service. We are just sharing the common wall between our offices. I should admit that civil service and in fact public sector in this case is rather frequently lagging behind, but at least for what I can say about most of the EU countries, it is being done a lot in order for the civil service simply to come up with solutions or involvement measures for the involvement of population, which could follow the demands, in fact, generated by the population due to technological advances.
Yes, I think the most important challenge is to, I think we need a good interaction of all the stakeholders. We have a lot of regulation in Europe. We have a lot of commissions and we have authorities and so on. But I think we have to combine the politics, the economy, the research, and we need necessary regulation. But the European regulation must be practical and flexible. And I think that is often a problem that we have. That we have a good and strong regulation, and then we are wondering that we have a big competition with China or the United States. And we have a big potential in Europe. And I think it's not good, yes, to be dependent from the outside systems. And sorry, it's also a problem that we are dependent from, for example, the United States. We have to generate new incubators. We need new solutions, not only a new authority like in Germany for cybersecurity, or the ENISA with, I don't know, 70 people in the EU, now in Athens, before in Creta. I think we need startups, we need support from the government, we need money, we need budget. And then we have to construct, and I think we need 10 years for that, our own systems. Yes? The main supplier of the European systems is the German Telecom. And the main supplier of the German Telecom is Huawei. Yes, in hardware and software. And that is a problem. And we have to control the systems, and we have to support our potential. And I think, yes, interaction of all stakeholders in Europe. That is a main topic.
Yes, I said that I have worked for innovation for at least 25 years, but not in a general sense, but very, very focused on small and medium-sized companies. And to give a definition, yes, you're right. If you talk about innovation, many politicians do. You have to say, what do you understand by innovation? And for me, it's clear, and many people do not know that it has a concrete link to the market. Only an invention, something new which comes to the market and is successful on the market, is an innovation in my understanding. And talking about Europe, I said already, I see a lot of shortcomings and disadvantages, and I think more and more do. And my thinking is, after having seen the topic of this panel, I wanted to say we are talking about economic and political challenges. For me, the political challenges are by far more difficult and by far more important than the economic ones. Because in the economic area we have, thanks God, the market economy, and the markets are really anonymous and normally really bring the best results. But in the political scene, I see a lot of disadvantages. I see at least already in the overall political system a deficit of democracy in Europe. I think the whole political system in Europe has to be reshaped, renovated in a more democratic way, which allows more flexible solutions, so that really more citizens feel understood and represented by what we do in Europe. I also think that the European Union in the shape we have at the moment is really not the end of thinkable solutions. A lot has to be analyzed and decided, and I think, you see, the European Union as it is maybe a one-generation-old, let's say, shape or organization, and I think every generation has to think about it again, and we have to be open for new solutions also on this general setup of the political system in Europe.
Very quickly, if we're talking about the welfare of ordinary people, which I think is at the heart of what was asked, I think it's economic security, jobs. I think it's also, as Herr Wolfmeier pointed out, political security. And by that, I'm talking about what we used to term in the 20th century as military security as well. I think, by the way, that Europe has not lived up to its potential. Europe has become much too dependent on the United States. And there is an expectation that the United States will always be there and always have Europe's back. I think in many cases it will, but I'm not sure that in every case it will. I think that in terms of some of the questions that I suggested earlier about security, that Europe has to take a lead and is very capable of taking a lead. The other thing is that I think, particularly for Europeans, that there is not a loss of understanding history. Europe has a very difficult history in many ways. Europeans, up until the end of the Second World War, were killing each other for 2,000 years. And one of the goals of the European Union was to stop that. And I'm wondering if that's not in danger now a bit. Understand where history has and learn from it. I spent yesterday all day at Auschwitz-Birkenau, and it comes home powerfully to you what can happen when history, politics, security get away from us.
One short further remark. I just think about a quote of a very famous author coming from your country, the United States. You all know Mark Twain, maybe. Talking about innovation always reminds me that Mark Twain has said, nobody wants to have change, only the baby in wet diapers. So please keep that in mind if you want to change the European Union or whatsoever.
Thank you for the answers. Somebody has something to say or not? Yes?
Well, I will show you some tables, My idea is that we will observe in the next future a little bit increasing role of the state, but very soon the multinational regulations, they will dominate on that area. And I think things like unification, unions, etc., after some crisis, they will be reinforced after all.
Thanks. The second question that we have is, how can we face the new hybrid threats, labor economics, or topic challenges?
What was the first one? Hybrid? Yeah, this is, of course, the hybrid is the most important security game in town right now, in the world. And we do not know yet how we're going to deal with it. Cyber is involved, but also clandestine operations with sympathizers, and then what we call in the Donbass region of Ukraine, the little green men. They're in uniform, but there's no insignias, so there's plausible deniability. An example of this might be from the minister's country. Any of the Baltic countries, in the east, they have substantial Russian minorities. Now, what happens if Moscow decides that one of their minorities in one of these countries is being abused? Whether they are or they are not is irrelevant in a way. There's very little possibility there's going to be a direct Russian invasion. But what they will do, if they perceive a danger or in their national interest, is cyber attacks, little green men, supporting Russian compatriots in Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia. How do other people react to that? This is a major challenge for your generation, how to deal with that as a security issue. We have to put a lot more money into cyber. We have to put, it's not just states like China and Russia. The United States is doing it. Everybody is doing it. And non-state actors are doing it increasingly. The whole world of the internet has become a weapon as well as a tool for good. How do you regulate that? How do you control it? It's a great rumor mill. We have examples of rumors starting on the internet that have led to mob violence and death, and they've not been true. What's the use of traditional military forces now? The United States is very, very strong as a military force. Both the Russians and the Chinese know that. So that's not how they're going to challenge the US. They're going to challenge the US in a hybrid way, mostly with cyber. So I have no concrete answers for you. This is your generation, as Herr Wolfmeier pointed out. Those of us who have been around for a long time, we can do some of this yet, but it won't be as much as you're going to have to do.
Yes, I think it's at the moment a very difficult situation, a very sensitive situation, and the problem is we have no diplomatic conversation at the moment. That is the biggest problem. Andrei Krutsky from Russia don't speak with Carsten Geier from Germany or with Dr. Fitchen or with the American. Then we have a first Chinese approach, yes, to regulate international cyber security law. It stopped at the moment. We have no regulations, and I think that is a big problem. We have it in the normal conversation about from the Cold War and so on, but now we need a new, I would say, international cyber agreement, cyber law. Or we should start with the discussion. And that is at the moment the biggest problem. And then we need attribution. Then we need capabilities to identify the persons who attack the different systems. And that is very complex. It's very expensive. And we need a lot of good staff, of good employees. And I think we need new education programs for that. And we need new innovations in cybersecurity to know who is the attacker behind the computer. And it is very dangerous. If you speak with the CEO, Mr. McAfee, is one of the biggest American cybersecurity enterprises. He said, hey, if you see a code from Russia, normally it is in 80%, it is not a Russian attack. It's an attack from a criminal organization from UK, from Germany, or so on. And it's very complicated, and it's very sensitive. What is the best form to react? Yes, we speak about hackback. What is a hackback? it's not easy to make a hackback. If you want to realize a hackback, you have to go in the different systems of other states, of other companies, in the private sector. Sometimes you have a school in Kazakhstan or a school in Köln in Germany. And I think that is our challenge. And sorry, before we talk about the technical operative possibilities, we have to start the international dialogue in New York, in the UN. And I think that we have to do.
Okay. Perhaps I will continue the trend of questioning the concept. And this, in this regard, I would simply like to point your attention to the fact, to this word, hybrid threat. What it is, hybrid threat? It's, of course, everybody, we all agree that it is a very fashionable concept. It's everywhere in the media. But if we would try to scratch a bit deeper, what do we get? It's hybrid threat usually means the combination of some clandestine operation, perhaps involvement of military or not, but it's the very heavy weight in this concept goes to the propaganda, and in fact work with the target nations, in fact population. Perhaps most of you are familiar with, I think, 2,500 years old writings of one Chinese guy called Sun Tzu. He defined military operation, well, he wrote a huge book on then military operations, but the core principle, in fact, he formulated the core principle of what now is called hybrid war. The military operation he defines in 4 levels, like in 4 stages. First, you destroy your enemy's plans. Then you destroy your enemy's allied links. Then you demoralize enemy's military. Then you demoralize enemy's population. And then you don't have any problem with enemy's military. Technically, what we see now with at least mostly Russia-related hybrid operation, it's more or less the good old Sun Tzu, only put into the context of, as I have mentioned, contemporary technologies. 100 years ago, what was called Facebook, what now is Facebook, was the newspaper. But if you take the newspapers of the time of World War I, both sides were putting articles about how devilish the other side was. In fact, this is the same what now is taking place in these days only in the internet blogosphere. That's why it's a zillion times faster. If you would go to Egypt to see the pyramids, and anybody would translate you the hieroglyphs, you can see lots of texts about how evil and how totally corrupt are the enemies of the Egypt, of the Red Land. The same goes for our Middle Ages, and you name it. So technically, we are still facing the same problem. Only the tools have changed, and this is where the importance of the cybersecurity tools is the paramount. On the other hand, if we look what does the EU, and in fact this in Russia they have this very popular term, the collective West. So what the collective West is, how it is reacting. I think the best comparison is with a heavyweight boxer. A heavyweight boxer who enters the ring, but who just defends. He just tries to defend from the adversary's impacts. Well, as a good boxer, the heavyweight champion, he can defend himself, but one or other kick from the enemy or from the adversary reaches the target. How long can you stand such a box match? I don't know, but sooner or later, simply the guy who just defends will simply fail, because he would let one or the other kick to go through defenses, and finally would get tired. So that's where I'm coming to my technically 3 points, which when we speak about coping with a hybrid threat. First thing, yes, this is the immediate defense, the cybersecurity tools, ability to identify the enemy, or at least hostile actions. But we all know that we live in the age when to create some bot, or in fact some attack weapon, which would require rather little costs to operate, is rather easy. To counter it, it's much more difficult. Anybody who tried programming can actually provide lots of examples in this field. So this is where the technology is important. Second thing, which I mentioned in my introductory speech, this is the resilience of the society itself. Because what the Sun Tzu was also suggesting to his emperor at his time was to demoralize society, simply to enemy society, to cut the people's belief in their institutions, in their values, and to establish the common belief that the opponent, the one who initiates the propaganda campaign, can offer better, anything better. This is how propaganda worked then. This is, I think, it works more or less now. Only technologies have changed. So this is the field where we have the huge importance of good governance. No matter which country, but we all would like to believe that we represent better governance than the other side. And the third element, which I also briefly touched, is the question when this super heavyweight boxer will stop defending and will start attacking. Like, I think we have everything. The only thing we are lacking is the political will to do some offensive operation in the same virtual field.
Just I would like to mention another issue which will change the life, and really this question is very complicated. I mean the dynamics of the artificial intellect, you know, and nobody knows what is going to happen there, because are these new robots? They will ask for more democracy. They will ask for decentralization of the centralization of resources. And here, are we going to observe evolution or revolutions in the human society? So that's going to change a lot. What's going to happen when the robot will start to design and to produce new robots? That's coming. The artificial intellect is going to be very competitive versus human being. Are we going to be able to control what we will create in 20, 30 years from now? So questions have to be considered in this environment, and we have to be careful with that. Anyway, my feeling is that the tendencies of the regulation, of the centralization of the power, they can become powerful. They can redesign the existing societies and the existing systems of the social and economic management, social and economic governance in the countries.
I'm really not the right one to tell you something about these security activities and options, but what I see and can say from the market side is that at least in my area or in Germany, SMEs especially are really not prepared to come along with these challenges. There are huge market opportunities for newcomers, startups, not only on the political level, but also on the economic level. I would say not 10% of our small and medium-sized companies are really prepared for that. And that's why I know that, for example, starting consultancies and all kind of activities will serve a demand, a huge demand in this area.
Just a couple more comments. I want to pull together a couple of threads. One statement by Minister Grazoulis, and the other, an earlier statement by Herr Wolfmeier. The minister's right. We have been disparaging the other as long as history has existed. What's changed is the technology. And the technology today makes it much, much harder. The other thing is what Herr Wolfmeier said is change. This is if you get nothing other than this point. And he quoted Mark Twain. People, human beings, we are all very comfortable with what we have. We tend to look to the past for answers to a lot of questions. We dislike having our comfort level challenged and our lives upset by change. There is a book by Thomas Kuhn on the, which I encourage you all to read. It's the Scientific Revolution, but I can't think of the full title now. And what he talks about in there is that even scientists are very reluctant to change positions unless they are absolutely forced to do that. The same thing happens with politics, with security. Plato once in the allegory of the cave, in the context of the discussion of the cave, said to a younger person, the only way we will get change is when the old generation dies. Well, I hope that's not entirely true, but that is the biggest danger, not understanding change as it comes.
Well, we are in the last 5 to 10 minutes. So you had several questions at the beginning, 8 questions. Maybe someone want to answer something or give something back.
I would love to hear from
you. You have now the chance, so make it happen. Yeah.
I don't let my students go until at least there are at least 10 questions.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
I have a question about the declining of U.S. power, and about the declining the U.S. power, and it's a question between freedom and it's a freedom of people in comparison with Russia and China government, which didn't accept society issues, and it's due to a government responsibility to choose if they like to make people aware of the cyber security, to make them aware of danger, in comparison to make them do that. And I think that right now, if people don't know if they really need to do something, they would reject it. It's like if we don't make them aware, they will never do that.
Are you asking about the decline of U.S. power? Yeah. Well, when I talk about the decline of U.S. power, it's really, in my mind, not a question of democracy. You mentioned democracy as well, and I hope I get the thrust of your question. It's a matter of reality. After the Second World War, there was no country that could, most of Europe was destroyed. much of Asia was destroyed. And just logically, as Europe recovered, as Asia recovered, Europe got stronger and more economically capable. So by just natural forces of economics and politics, there's been a decline, a leveling. The United States is still a very powerful country. The demands for democracy, I think it was mentioned earlier, we are seeing challenges to democracy in a number of places in the world. We are seeing challenges, and often it's called the third way. It's sort of light authoritarianism. We see this in China. We see this where the model is, we will provide economic stability and growth for you as long as you do not upset the political process. So that's the social contract that the Chinese Communist Party has. We see this in Singapore. We see it in other places too. Maybe North Korea is moving towards that. There is no ironclad. It was thought for a long time that there was a connection between the development of political democracy and economic well-being. We're beginning to rethink that it is possible that there can be an authoritarian state, and we're seeing that, and economic development as well. That's a fascinating turn. And when I talk about the decline of U.S. power, I'm talking about mostly the rise of other powers and their capability. So I don't know if I've got everything you were talking about, but.
There's a last question.
Okay. You talk about the renationalization of European politics. Could you please explain it, the concept of renationalization deeper for us? Thank you.
At the conclusion of the Second World War, led primarily by some French scholars and government officials, there was a major effort to denationalize politics in Europe because nationalism and national politics had led to so much bloodshed in Europe. For many years, we saw first the European Economic Community develop and spread from the original 6 countries in Western Europe. We saw the Rome Statute. Then we saw Amsterdam and Maastricht. So the European Union was born out of the European political community. We saw a growing European bureaucracy in Brussels. We saw the advent of a European Parliament. So it seemed for a very long time that there would be no challenge to an increasingly European community and the decline of national sovereignty. A lot of us think that because of the economic crisis that started in 2008 in the United States and the migrant crisis, the refugee migrant crisis, that there has been this renationalization of politics. And what I mean by that is more very nationalist parties, right-wing parties. I'm not making a judgment about them. I'm just saying this is what I think the reality is. And we are seeing this in more and more European countries, even countries where the right wing does not control government. They are increasing their power. Now there's a spectrum. There are what I would call legitimate conservative parties, national parties, but then there is also the far right. We are seeing more power by them. If you watched the news this past week, there were very large demonstrations in the eastern German city of Chemnitz. And the mayor of Chemnitz said, these are the biggest demonstrations we've seen by the alt-right, what in the US, the alt-right. We're seeing this in the United States too, with the Trump government. And so I think the national politics is becoming more important than the European politics. When the migrant crisis started, we saw Hungary, we put up barbed wire to keep migrants out. We saw first Germany open their doors and Scandinavia open their doors to migrants. And then those doors closed because there began to be a nationalist backlash. And you began to see the arguments about German culture is being destroyed, French culture is being destroyed. Central and Eastern Europe were at the very forefront of saying, we really can't take refugees. We don't have the capability. We don't have the willpower to do that. And this has come back to haunt Angela Merkel and the CDU. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about the rebirth, the renationalization politics, the change in from the European Union model. The European Union is not dead by any means, but I think it's got serious problems, to a more national orientation of politics.
Well, we are in the ending. For my part, it was a great experience. And for the people here, I have also a great question. Do you know the Artificial Intelligence Alliance Forum from the European Commission? No? Check it out, and you learn a lot about future things. So thank you very much for listening, and for the next session, it will be a lot about the youth, about this. So be here, and focus, take something to drink, and come back, and we will see... Sorry. I'm sometimes thinking about what I must say, but if you have questions, be welcome. We are here, so take the chance to talk.
It was a pleasure.